The Mystery of Suzanne Morphew. A Mother's Day Disappearance. On Mother's Day, 2020, in the quiet mountain town of Salida, Colorado, 49-year-old Suzanne Morphew set out for a bike ride and never returned. What began as a missing person case quickly spiraled into one of the most haunting and complex mysteries the state had ever seen. Behind the search parties, police investigations, and courtroom battles lay a story of family, secrets, and unanswered questions. Was Suzanne the victim of a tragic accident, or was something far darker at play? This film retraces her final day, the frantic hunt for answers, and the suspicions that tore her family apart. The story of Suzanne Morphew begins far from the Colorado mountains, in the quiet neighborhoods of Alexandria, Indiana. Childhood friends remember her as a bright, compassionate girl who loved art and music. She had a gentle presence, the kind that made others feel safe. Teachers described her as diligent, creative, and kind-hearted. During high school, Suzanne caught the attention of Barry Morphew, a popular athlete known for his competitiveness on the baseball field. Their romance was the kind classmates whispered about, the star athlete and the soft-spoken young woman who balanced him out. After graduation, they married in 1994. For those who watched from the outside, their story seemed to belong in a picture frame, small-town sweethearts building a life together. Their early years were filled with milestones, buying a first home, starting a family. Suzanne became the mother of two daughters, Mallory and Macy. Friends recall how she seemed happiest when surrounded by her girls, whether cheering from the sidelines at school events or helping with late-night homework at the kitchen table. Barry built a reputation as a hard-working landscaper and businessman. Yet life tested Suzanne early. She was diagnosed with cancer, a battle that left scars but also revealed her resilience. She fought through chemotherapy with determination, refusing to let illness take away her role as a mother. Survivors often speak of life before and after cancer. For Suzanne, the after meant living with deeper gratitude and a sharper awareness of time. In 2018, the Morphew family made a major decision to leave Indiana and move west to Colorado. They settled in Salida, a postcard-perfect town surrounded by the Rockies. The mountain views stretched endlessly, the air was crisp, and the trails offered Suzanne the outdoor freedom she loved. Neighbors saw a couple who had achieved the dream, a spacious home, financial stability, and two beautiful daughters on the verge of adulthood. But beneath the surface, Suzanne was wrestling with private doubts. In text messages and journal entries, she admitted to feeling controlled, to questioning whether her marriage was still a partnership or a cage. These words, unseen by the world at the time, would later become haunting evidence. For now, though, in the spring of 2020, Suzanne still appeared to be the smiling mother and wife. The stage was set for tragedy, one that would shatter the illusion of perfection and capture the nation's attention. Sunday, May 10th, 2020. Mother's Day. The Morphew home sat quietly among tall trees, the mountains rising in the distance. Inside, the morning began like any other. Barry claimed he left early for a job in Broomfield, 3 hours away. Their daughters were away on a church trip, planning to return later that day. That left Suzanne alone in the house, texting friends, browsing her phone, enjoying the stillness of the morning. Around 8 a.m., she exchanged cheerful messages with a close friend. Then, without warning, the conversation stopped. No reply, no explanation. For investigators, this timestamp would later become crucial. It was the moment Suzanne seemed to vanish from her own life. Barry later insisted she probably went for a bike ride, one of her favorite activities. The idea seemed plausible. The winding back roads near their home were scenic and familiar. But what came next defied explanation. By afternoon, Suzanne's bicycle was discovered off County Road 225. Deputies who arrived on scene found it oddly placed, as if set down rather than flung aside in an accident. Her helmet, located later, raised even more questions. It didn't look like the debris from a crash. There were no skid marks, no footprints, no sign of a struggle. Just silence. Neighbors began to worry. One told reporters later, "On Mother's Day?" Suzanne would never go this long without calling her girls. Others joined the search, calling her name into the trees. That evening, the official search began in earnest. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation and local deputies coordinated volunteers. The scene was surreal. Headlights lined the roads, flashlights cut through the darkness, search dogs barked into the wind. Helicopters circled overhead while riders on horseback combed narrow trails. Everywhere there was movement, but nowhere was there Suzanne. For her daughters, the day that was meant to be a celebration of their mother became the day she disappeared without a trace. And for Chaffee County, it was the beginning of a mystery that would haunt them for years to come. By the morning of May 11th, the disappearance of Suzanne Morphew had already grown from a family crisis into a full-scale community emergency. The search stretched across the rolling hills and thick forests of Chaffee County. Deputies marked off areas with yellow tape while neighbors walked shoulder to shoulder through fields and creek beds, calling her name into the wind. The atmosphere was surreal. Helicopters buzzed above the valley. Search dogs barked sharply as they pulled handlers toward scents that led nowhere. Volunteers carried flashlights even in daylight, peering under brush and into culverts. Horses clopped along rocky trails as riders scanned the landscape. What had once been a place of beauty, green slopes, quiet streams, the majesty of the Rockies, now felt ominous, as though the wilderness itself had swallowed Suzanne whole. Within days, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation and the FBI joined the case. Investigators moved quickly, treating the Morphew home not as a safe haven, but as a potential crime scene. They photographed every room, bagged potential evidence, and removed electronic devices. Cadaver dogs sniffed corners of the property while technicians swept the house for hidden traces. Outside, reporters gathered, their cameras trained on deputies coming and going. Local headlines splashed Suzanne's smiling face across front pages. "Missing mother in Chaffee County," the headlines screamed. For neighbors, it was almost unthinkable. In a town where people left doors unlocked and children played in the street, a woman had vanished without explanation. Behind the scenes, digital data began to paint a troubling picture. Suzanne's phone had gone silent around midday on May 10th, cutting off in the middle of her conversation with a friend. Her daughters had tried to call her, no answer. The device never pinged another tower again. Friends came forward with stories that added complexity. They told investigators about Suzanne's private text messages where she confided her unhappiness in her marriage. In one message, she wrote simply, "He won't let me be me." Another hinted that she longed for freedom, that she was ready to take control of her own life. Detectives also scrutinized Barry's movements. GPS and phone records suggested he'd been driving to multiple trash bins in different towns on the very day Suzanne vanished. To police, it didn't look like routine errands. It looked like someone getting rid of something important. Yet on the surface, Barry remained the concerned husband. He asked for Suzanne's safe return. He hugged his daughters tightly. He told deputies he had no idea what had happened. But quietly, behind the press conferences and search efforts, investigators were already shifting their focus. Suzanne Morphew had not simply vanished into the wilderness. Something had happened on Mother's Day, and the man who claimed to love her most was quickly becoming their prime suspect. In the days after Suzanne vanished, Barry Morphew presented himself as a desperate husband. Just a week later, he recorded a video plea, looking into the camera with tense eyes. "Oh, Suzanne, if anyone is out there and can hear this, please, we'll do whatever it takes to bring you back. We love you. We miss you. Your girls need you. No questions asked. Just bring her back." The video was broadcast on local news and shared widely on social media. To some, it was moving. To others, something felt off, too rehearsed, too stiff. Viewers began to whisper, was this genuine grief or a performance? Behind the cameras, investigators were piecing together data that only deepened their suspicions. Barry's phone records revealed unusual activity. His truck's GPS showed him making stops at multiple dumpsters across different towns on Mother's Day. He said he was driving to a construction site in Broomfield, but prosecutors later suggested he was discarding evidence. Even small details raised questions. Investigators noticed scratches on Barry's arms. He explained them away as the result of landscaping work. But to detectives, they looked uncomfortably like defensive wounds. Then came another chilling discovery: a tranquilizer dart cap found at the Morphew home. Barry was known to tranquilize deer, but investigators theorized he may have used similar equipment on Suzanne. The possibility was disturbing, not an impulsive attack, but a calculated method of control. Meanwhile, Suzanne's private communications painted a stark picture. In text to a close friend, she wrote, "He won't let me be me." She confided that her marriage felt like a cage, that she was reconnecting emotionally with a man from Indiana. To investigators, this was a potential motive. Suzanne was ready to leave, and Barry may not have let that happen. Neighbors, too, recalled odd moments. One told deputies they had heard noises near the Morphew property on the night of May 9th. Another described Barry's demeanor in the days after as strangely calm, even defensive. The public, once sympathetic, began to turn. Social media filled with speculation. Commentators dissected Barry's video plea frame by frame. Local newspapers ran opinion pieces titled, "Where is Suzanne?" and "Why so many questions for Barry?" Still, Barry maintained his innocence. He insisted Suzanne had been abducted, possibly by a stranger. He spoke of mountain lions, kidnappers, or random predators. He gave interviews, repeating that he loved his wife and would never harm her. But behind closed doors, investigators were convinced. In their eyes, the story was clear. Suzanne hadn't vanished into the wilderness. Her disappearance had been orchestrated, and Barry Morphew was the man responsible. Almost a year passed with no sign of Suzanne. Search efforts continued, but the silence from the mountains was deafening. Then, in May 2021, exactly 1 year to the day after her disappearance, investigators made their move. News cameras captured the moment Barry Morphew was taken into custody. Neighbors watched in shock as deputies escorted him, handcuffed, into a patrol car. The charges were staggering: first-degree murder, tampering with evidence, and attempting to influence a public official. At the press conference that followed, prosecutors laid out what they described as a compelling circumstantial case. They spoke of GPS records showing Barry's suspicious movements. They highlighted his repeated stops at dumpsters, the tranquilizer dart cap found at his home, and the scratches on his body. They revealed details of Suzanne's secret communications with her high school friend in Indiana, suggesting Barry had motive rooted in jealousy and control. Inside the courtroom, the battle was fierce. The prosecution painted Barry as a man who couldn't accept losing control, who snapped when Suzanne sought independence. They showed maps of his phone pings, graphs of his truck's movements, and timelines that placed him in crucial locations at suspicious times. The defense countered aggressively. They reminded the court that no body had been found, no murder weapon, no blood, no direct forensic link. Most damaging to the state's case was the revelation of unknown male DNA found in Suzanne's car, DNA that did not belong to Barry. Defense attorneys hammered this point. If the husband was guilty, why was someone else's genetic profile at the scene? The Morphew daughters, Mallory and Macy, took their place behind their father. Tearful, they pleaded with the judge to release him, insisting he could never have harmed their mother. Their loyalty complicated the narrative. For the public, the image of two young women standing by the man accused of killing their mother was both heartbreaking and haunting. Journalists filled the courtroom, their pens scratching notes as arguments flew back and forth. Outside, television crews reported every twist. Commentators debated whether the case was justice in action or a tragic overreach by desperate prosecutors. After months of hearings, the outcome stunned many. In April 2022, a judge ruled the prosecution had not presented enough evidence to proceed to trial. The charges were dismissed without prejudice, meaning the state could refile if stronger evidence emerged. Barry Morphew walked out of court a free man. Cameras flashed as he left the courthouse with his daughters at his side. For some, it was vindication. For others, it was a miscarriage of justice. And for Suzanne's family, her siblings, her father, her closest friends, it was agony. Their loved one was still gone. Their questions remained unanswered. When the charges against Barry Morphew were dropped in 2022, the reaction was immediate and divided. In the courthouse, his defense team embraced, smiling for cameras as if a great injustice had been undone. Outside, Suzanne's siblings stood silently, their faces etched with disbelief. One of her brothers told reporters, "We just want the truth. We just want Suzanne's story to be told." For Barry, dismissal meant freedom. He returned home, his daughters at his side, holding tightly to him as if nothing could shake their bond. To supporters, it was a sign of his innocence. To critics, it was the image of a man escaping justice. Yet prosecutors made it clear, the case was not closed. The dismissal was without prejudice. They could refile charges if new evidence emerged. Investigators promised to keep searching, though many in the community wondered if the chance for justice had slipped away forever. Then, in September 2023, the story took a devastating turn. In a remote, rugged stretch of Saguache County, 40 miles south of the Morphew home, searchers discovered human remains. Weeks later, DNA testing confirmed the worst. It was Suzanne. The announcement was met with both sorrow and anger. After 3 long years, her family finally had an answer, but it was the one they had feared most. Vigils were held in Salida. Candles flickered beneath photos of Suzanne's smiling face. Strangers left flowers, cards, and prayers. But the discovery raised more questions than it answered. How had her body ended up in such a remote area? Had it been there all along, missed by early searches? Or had it been moved later? Investigators offered few details. Barry was not rearrested, and officials remained tight-lipped about whether they believed he was still responsible. Public opinion fractured even further. Some pointed again to Barry, convinced his freedom was temporary. Others insisted the state had failed from the start, that Suzanne's death might never be fully explained. For Suzanne's daughters, the heartbreak was immeasurable. They had lost their mother, endured their father's arrest, and now faced a future still clouded with uncertainty. For her siblings and extended family, frustration grew. Justice seemed elusive. And for the people of Colorado, the case became more than a family tragedy. It became a symbol of the fragility of trust, of the complexity of justice, and of the haunting reality that sometimes, even when answers appear, the truth remains just out of reach. The story of Suzanne Morphew is not just a case file or a headline. It is the story of a woman whose life was filled with love, struggle, and hope. A woman who deserved far more than to become a mystery whispered about in courtrooms and news reports. Suzanne was a mother who fought through illness to see her daughters grow. She was a friend who listened, a sister who supported, and a woman who dreamed of freedom and happiness. Those who knew her say she had a light about her, a warmth that drew people close. That light was extinguished too soon. Her disappearance shattered the illusion of safety in a small Colorado town. Neighbors who once left their doors unlocked now spoke of fear. Families who once looked to the Morphews as an example of stability now whispered about control, betrayal, and secrets. The legal system struggled to bring clarity. A husband charged, then freed. A family divided in loyalty. A community torn between suspicion and doubt. And through it all, Suzanne's voice, the one that mattered most, was silent. When her remains were found in 2023, the news was devastating. But even that discovery failed to deliver closure. The circumstances of her death remain unresolved. The truth, the full truth, is still hidden somewhere between the mountains and the memories of those who loved her. And so, we are left with questions. How well do we ever know the people closest to us? How many secrets can exist behind the walls of an ordinary family home? And when justice falters, who speaks for those who no longer can? Suzanne's story echoes far beyond Chaffee County. It reminds us of the countless women who vanish each year, whose names may not make the headlines, but whose lives matter just the same. It is a story of how fragile trust can be, how quickly a life can unravel, and how long families can wait for answers that may never come. As we close this chapter, one truth remains. Suzanne Morphew deserves to be remembered, not only as a victim, but as a mother, a sister, and a friend. As a woman who lived, loved, and hoped. Because in the end, the search for Suzanne is about more than finding her body. It is about finding justice. It is about finding the truth. Every secret waits to be revealed. Every silence that carries an echo, every story is waiting to be told. This was her secret. What about yours? What do you think about this case? Share your thoughts in the comments. Every voice matters. Subscribe and step into the echoes of truth.